Hello and welcome to day 10 and day 11 of the 20-day Building Your Brand Challenge. Now today's a really big one. We didn't post yesterday because as we were recording the content, we realized how big today's session is actually be. So you may not be able to digest this in one sitting and you may need to actually come back and reference this particular video, and that's okay. But if you're able to go and get pen and paper right now, I would actually do so. So what we're going to cover today is branded content. What is branded content and how do I use branded content? Before we dive into that, I just want to recap a few things of where you're actually at. So you would have your logo briefs in play by now. You may or you may not have seen some sketches or some visual representations come back to you, which is fantastic. Keep the momentum going on that. For those of you that already have a logo set that you're happy with, you may very well have a content brief for having some wording written for you, or a video, if not photography brief, in play, which is timely because of what we're going to cover today. So what I'm going to talk about is branded content. Now let's understand what the definition of that actually is. Most people think that branded content is something that you produce, whether it's a video or a written piece, whether it's a social media post or a photograph or a piece of marketing material, whether it's digital or it's offline, i.e. meaning it's printed, that has your logo or your brand on it. And in reality, yes, that is what branded content is, but also let's go a little bit deeper and understand what else can be considered to be branded content. Now, something that we'll cover with you in the next couple of days, and I've already mentioned it in some other videos, is how your brand walks, how it talks, and what it wears. Now, some people get really confused with that because when I say what it wears, people automatically assume that that's the job of an image consultant in terms of what am I wearing? Am I wearing a collared shirt and a jacket, or am I wearing a t-shirt with something quite casual? No. When it comes to branding, I always refer to what a brand wears insofar as the kind of marketing that it does. And the reason that I refer to what it wears in that context is because you have to be comfortable with the way that you're going to market your brand. Now, I'm not going to talk about that anymore today because today's a big session, but in the next coming days, we will get onto that. What I am going to talk about a little bit is how your brand walks and how it talks. How your brand talks about specifically the tone of voice. So if you go back to your brand's anatomy, if that was a living, breathing person, what kind of language would they use to communicate your message? Or what kind of language would you use to communicate your brand's message? That's what I mean when I say how a brand talks. When I say how a brand walks, what I mean is the visual representation. So i.e., what kind of visual assets, what kind of visual identity are you going to have to represent how the brand actually walks? So that could be a logo. If you go back to your mood or your vision board, that could be an identifiable trademark or an accessory or something that you're specifically known for or known as. It could be a color, it could be a title or a name. So they're the two definitions that you need to stick with. So what we want to talk about is what is considered, or what else is considered as branded content. If you've ever done a video or you've been recorded doing a keynote presentation or a PowerPoint presentation, you can use that as content. If you have ever given a speech or a talk in a small group or one-on-one in a workshop style group or some kind of a training scenario, or even at a networking event, that is branded content. If you've actually written any media articles or press releases, any blogs or any white papers that may or may not have some case studies, that is also considered branded content. Any photographs that you have of yourself in action doing what you do, whether it's selling a service or providing that service, whether it's making a product, whether you import or export or you manufacture it, that's considered branded content. Now with photographs, it could be of the individual, it could be of the product, they could be professionally shot, they could be behind the scenes, and they could also be candid shots. That's all considered to be branded content. And the reason that I give you such a comprehensive list, and we'll get onto that in a minute when we start talking about how we use the branded content, is because it's really important to know what each of the different elements are and where it is that you're going to find it. So part of today's exercise, and I'll go through it a little bit more later on, but part of today's exercise is to set aside a 1 to 2 hour block of time within the next 24 hours and start gathering all of the information, all of that branded content that I just listed earlier in that session. Where this becomes quite a disciplined routine that you're going to have to get used to is that from today until the end of this challenge in another 9 days, you're going to spend 30 minutes every single day religiously looking for more branded content so that you can start to compile what I call a resource library. And the way you're going to break it down is you're going to break it down into presentations and speeches. You're going to break it down into video content. You're going to break it down into audio content. And you're also going to break it down into actual photographs. And you could potentially have another folder that you would break down into written content. Once you've set up your file management structure like that, you're then able to start finding all the bits of information. Now, you may not know where it all is, and it may need a little bit of time for you to do a bit of a discovery, if not an excavation process, depending on how far back you actually want to go. The idea is you want to go as far back as perhaps a couple of years or even at the start of your career, because all of it tells a story. It's up to you to decide on how far back you want to go. If it's anything like me, I've got 20 years of content to go back on. So you want to give yourself a little bit of time. There is no way you're going to digest and get any of this done in one whole sitting, which is why I'm challenging you to do a little bit every single day. Imagine being given the biggest, most delicious, scrumptious chocolate, giant chocolate. You're not going to sit and eat that in one sitting. And if you do, you're going to be very, very, very sick. The same thing's going to happen when you go looking for your branded content. If you try and attempt to do it in one sitting, you're going to get sick of it. And I don't want you to do that. I want you to nurture it. I want you to nourish it. I want you to enjoy everything that you find, because this is going to come into play when it comes time to marketing your brand. So the second part of this video now is about how we're going to use that branded content. So I've already explained the 5 different ways or the 5 different folders that you can start collating all of your content. But now I'm going to give you some actual real examples of some of the things that I do with my clients in terms of how we create or how we extract branded content. Now, let's just get one thing straight. Anybody that has a brand, whether it's a personal brand or a business or product brand, has branded content. Nobody in this universe has nothing. Even if the very least all you've got is one PowerPoint presentation and a couple of dozen photographs of you, that's enough to get started. Because now that you know about this exercise, now that you know about gathering the content, now that you understand what branded content is, guess what? You're going to naturally do it. Every time you go to a networking event, you're going to make sure that you get photographs that you can use. Every time you give a keynote presentation or a PowerPoint presentation or some kind of visual summary, you're going to make sure that you're going to get the slides from that, and you're going to make sure you get the video, if not audio content. If ever you get interviewed on a podcast, or you get interviewed in general, or there's some kind of video footage of you at an event or presenting or producing your product or delivering your service, you're going to make sure you get a copy of that. So the analogy that I like to give my clients is everything that you produce is pure, solid gold. Every piece of content you've got is a gold bullion. It's a brick. Depending on how much or how many pieces of content you've got depends on how big your gold bullion stash is. You might have a couple of bricks, you might have pallets full. It doesn't matter. what you've got to remember is that when we start delivering branded content, when we start marketing the brand, you don't want to fall into the trap of what all the newbies do is, and that is get so excited that they start talking really, really fast and then they deliver everything, and all we do is we vomit everything out. Imagine being on the receiving end. You're like, whoa, 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 whoa. That's just like too much. Take a breath, take a step back, reevaluate. Imagine that that gold bullion is what you've got to give away, but you've got to make it last. And I'm going to give you some techniques right now on how you are going to make it last. But you're going to shave a filing off and deliver it, another filing off, deliver that, another one, another one, another one, another one. And I'm going to show you very easily how one gold bullion bar could last you 6, maybe even 12 months of marketing if you do it strategically. So let me give you some examples. Recently I did a podcast, and what I do with all the podcasts that I appear on in any video is that I get online and I use some of the free translators, and I actually get a script printed out of the podcast itself. So not only do I have the video footage of the podcast, I also have the audio footage, but I also now have a transcript. And what I do is I go through the transcript and I highlight questions that I'm actually asked during the interview, and then I make notes. And what I do is we cut up the video, or we cut up the podcast and the audio, and depending on how many questions I'm asked, let's just say, for example, it was a 20-minute interview and I was asked 15 to 20 different questions, and I cut all of those up as snippets, I've potentially got 15 to 20 weeks of branded content that I can use in marketing from one podcast, one video. In layman's terms, that's 5 months of marketing content, 5 months of branded content that you have to use. The other thing I then do is, from those snippets, I find photographs of myself either presenting or on stage or in action or with clients. And if there's any gold in there, like a one-line quote that I might have said, I actually pull that quote out, I put it over the top of the photograph, I produce 15 to 20 of those from that one interview, and I use that as social media content. That's another 15 to 20 weeks of branded content that I have to market. One of the other things I do is, if I was giving an actual presentation with slides such as a PowerPoint, I go through all of the slides and I have a look at how many of those slides can I potentially use as individual posts for social media. Now, most presentations have approximately 30 to 40 slides. If you're smart and you cut up every single slide as an image and you use that on your social media accounts, you have 30 to 40 slides that you can use on your social media. Again, that's 30 to 40 weeks of branded content that you have to use. But it doesn't stop there. If you have images, that exercise I did with you for the image library to extract images, whether you have purchased them from a public image library or whether you've actually commissioning a photographer to photograph them for you, collate them all. You can use different photographs to talk about different ideas, different concepts. Photographs may elicit an idea about a story. Again, each one of these photographs is potentially branded content. Now, when it comes to images, what you want to do is start your image library, which is one of the folders that I recommended, so that every time you've got an idea, you can come back to it because you've got a central location where you can find all of this. Where images start to get really fun is that these images that you're using for your social media content also has multiple usage. So what I mean by that is you can use it as the header to send out your emails on. You can use it as the header when you actually write a blog and post it. You can use it as the header or contained within the body of perhaps a case study or a white paper that you might write. You could even use it in your slide presentation that I showed you a little bit earlier. So now you're starting to see how branded content can come in many forms. And the only restriction that you have is how creative you are at collating it and how strategic you are in releasing it. Remember my gold bullion analogy? A file at a time, a file at a time, a file at a time. The same as eating chocolate all in one sitting. It'll make you sick if you do it all at once. Imagine being on the receiving end of receiving your brand. How would that make you feel? If you're thinking, whoa, that's too much, back it off a bit. If you're thinking, it's not enough, I want more engagement, then ramp it up. It's completely up to you and completely flexible. So now that we know how to use the branded content, I want to go through one last thing, one rule of thumb that I always tell my clients about this. Clients that are on a tight budget, and let's face it, everybody has a budget. Nobody has unlimited funds or a sack of money that they can just pull. So we have to be very, very clever and efficient, almost to the point of economy, about how much we stretch the budget that we've got to market ourselves or to create branded content. So let me give you an analogy. We had a client once who we had recommended that as they were starting to become quite well known, that every time that this individual was to give a keynote presentation, that they have it professionally recorded. We organised for a videographer to be able to do that with them, and the videographer had said, look, every time I go to an event, the professional shot footage, raw and unedited, was going to cost $800. The client said, $800? Are you joking? What if I did 10 presentations in a month? That's $8,000. Yes, that's good mathematics. That's $8,000. However, what's even better mathematics is this. If you paid that videographer an additional editing fee, let's just say, for example, it was about $500 or $600. Let's call it $500. So you've got $800 for your fee for filming, $500 for your editing. That's an approximate fee of $1,300 for one piece of content. Now you're probably thinking, Jesus, $1,300 for one piece of content. I can't afford to spend that. You're right, you can't. But when you break it down into, say, I don't know, 15 to 20 individual segments from that one video, and you've got 15 to 20 pieces, individual bits of marketing, and you've got 5 months worth of content to release, if you release one video snippet a week, then your cost per video or your cost per branded content is only $65 a video. When you start to think of it in context like that, $65 per video in terms of what that kind of engagement you could get from that one piece of branded content could give you as your dollar value, sounds pretty cheap to me. So you now need to start thinking about using your branded content in terms of a cost per usage. Image consultants do that all the time. They say, well, there's no point in buying a beautiful $3,000 designer jacket if all you do is wear it twice. If you only wear it twice, it's $1,500 per wear. Hardly seems worth it. But if you buy a $3,000 jacket and you wear it at least 10 times during the year, that's a cost per wear of $300. It's a little bit more palatable. You need to start thinking of your branded content, whether it's audio, whether it's visual, whether it's photography or photos or images, whether it's written content, whether it's video content, in terms of a cost per use. If you were to cut it up, if you were to file it off from your gold bullion and use it in that context and stretch it out as much as you possibly could without having to regurgitate the content each time, you will find that you'll stretch your marketing budget a hell of a lot further. So today's exercise is this: 2-hour time limit. Start compiling all of the branded content or potential content that you can use to market your brand. Start filing it. Start looking for it on archives up in the cloud. Start contacting people that you know that may have footage or that may have documentation, images, articles that you've done or that you've written. That may take a little bit of time, which is why after today's 2-hour sitting, every single day until the end of the challenge, 30 minutes a day. No more, no less. Do as much as you can for 30 minutes. Find as much as you can in 30 minutes. Archive it, archive it, archive it. As much as you can, archive it, and then categorize it into the 5 folders I told you about. Come tomorrow, we're going to start talking about how we can now evolve this branded content. And in the next few days, we'll start talking about marketing your brand. So to finish off this long post, wow, it was a bit of a workout. I know you're probably thinking, whoa, it's too much information. That's all right. Take your time. Go back through your notes. Replay this video as much as you need to. If you've got any questions, PM me. Of course, if you know anyone that's going to benefit from this 20-day Building Your Brand Challenge, please feel free to share this with them, share the profile with them. And of course, I'd love to hear from you. Make sure you PM me or mark up your comments.